Hey, so I have some, I guess, efforts at false flag neuroframing and misdirection fake news, uh, trauma based mind control, racial tensions aims at destabilizing the United States. Um, Also, trying to create reasons for an endless perp, how I'm outmatched by the full force of the federal government, and the difference between faking a voice as non-consensually, synthetically telepathic, targeted individual with unknown numbers of receivers and like a 1600, 1700 um, senders into my consciousness, separate by appearance, exclusively neurolinguistic programming. So I'm tortured, and a trauma-based mind control outcome of extreme torture like this is actually multiple personality disorders. But this is where it gets really complicated, and you can't like blame the victim here. So in the psychological operations that happened in Tualatin in 26, when that whole gang invaded, and then psychological operations that were going on in Redmond when I was there, they called it an archetype. But they, of all the people in the Southwest in Texas, like surveying them how they look or whatnot, there has been through EMF perping sort of a stereotypical Texas Westerner look with like a big hat, particular form of a white dude. Um, and so that archetype of somebody passed out on a machine in another location, faking somebody's form from the Southwest, from like Texas, was perping on me, trying to cause conflict on many separate occasions. The same archetype. And there's the program's probably well known, or however it works. For anybody who's an EMF person, who can be anybody, could be that archetype if they wanted to. I don't think the funny voices I make sitting on my fucking couch are actually a multiple personality or a different person. I've used a Southern affected voice to try to use NLP for good against perpetrators that use it in my head. But in no way, shape, or form would I call it as severe of what this really is. Like, I'll tell you, at speed of thought, I am like carried out, and then speed of sound into an unknown number of synthetically telepathic people. It's only a voice for me, the brain, making it. But in taking control of somebody else who wanted to be mind controlled, throwing out an entirely falsified electromagnetic frequency form, and whatnot, there may be a more applicable it's not multiple personality disorder. There may be a much more applicable or already written term, like maybe even CIA manuals with synthetic telepathy, or however it really works. Like, that character of that voice, I mean, it's me that's making the voice, and I'm from the Northwest. But that character of its voice, when I say it could take on a life of its own, I mean literally. Like this archetype showing up, giving me sass from the Southwest for so many years. So I talk some shit about some guys from the fucking Southwest using their own goddamn fucking accent. But then, boom, that shit can be made real in South Texas and kick off an MK Ultra Super Soldier to kill everybody in a supermarket, in a crime that was already being committed, that you could try and attempt to neuroframe somebody else with like broadcast JPEGs in front of their eyes and be like, no, you did that. You activated an MK Ultra Super Soldier on your own, which is a lie. MK Ultra Super Soldiers have been activated around me, unfortunately. I may have said this earlier on a video. At MK Ultra Super Soldier man named Sarah, who had been a TI. I think he was getting tortured also. They may have tortured Sarah into being like, no, now you're going to be a woman, and just brainwashed him over 15 years or whatever. I was responding to 15 years of NLP. A lot of white devils, some people from the Southwest, people faking voices from the Southwest to do the blowback thing on people from the Southwest is what it amounted to. And that big hat archetype EMF perp, may have been from a skinny dude from Kansas City, or Saskatchewan. And it can take on a life of its own in synthetic telepathy. I'm not an EMF perp or an EMF being. Now, as an EMF being, there's voice modulation software and all kinds of stuff like that. But so I used the Southern affected, a faked Southerner's voice for many years, just screwing around. I guess for those that were, or most definitely those that were still observing my broadcast. I wouldn't call it a multiple personality disorder. I was using NLP and using their well-spoken liar language, maybe for some even giving them an impression of what the voices in my head have sounded like Christians warned about well-spoken liars. That's an impersonation of a well-spoken liar, a fake Southern voice, and then there's real voice actors in the South. But with the synthetic telepathy, it can take on a mind of its own and other manifestations. Like, for example, I've been sitting over here jibber-jabbing about the lawlessness of the electromagnetic frequency, and sort of getting some Q stuff from the fucking Star Trek movies, but I'm not an EMF perp. Talking about the lawlessness of the EMF form, where you can switch into anybody as a monitor consciousness, go to anywhere in the world, break into any home, and this being done by police. I called it similar to a pig fucking a goat, making a goat pig. And what I was describing was people on their EMF headsets, they can be anybody they want. So I'm seeing on a video, if it's unaltered or whatnot, a TI disclosure that helped me understand, these people hearing my thoughts as I'm having them. He said he was walking around someplace in his town, and somebody came up with like a goat and a pig and said they tried to get it on. Totally messing with both me as the TI and then the other TI. But then there's other standard like divide and conquer tactics for like folks and whatnot, and we're all really manipulatable. I do a Southern voice that's pretty funny. I initially started it up to make some fun about that George W. Bush. I'm not actually from Texas, and I'm not faking an EMF form of somebody in Texas, or anything like that. And it's been I wouldn't like go out to a country western bar wearing a hat using that voice. No, I've been using it as just try and discourage in vain those on my broadcast still broadcasting me. And actually, I think it's hilarious. It's also really funny, but it could be a new and then there was another thing, like on a TI that I follow in his disclosures. He did a targeted individual interview, and it was a guy that identified himself as the name Bear and then spelled his names with like numbers. And he had like perfect face paint on and all these indicators that made me totally realize that was an EMF perpetrator fucking with Kevin pretending to be a TI. A lot of perps, or that perps pretending to be a TI is a playbook tactic against them. So my Southern affected voice is not necessarily a multiple personality disorder, although it's a trauma-based outcome. However, being synthetically telepathic with an unknown number of receivers and the complete latitude to be limited only by your creativity in the EMF, faking anybody's form, it's not so much a multiple personality disorder as an interbeing offshoot. What would be a better way to describe it? Like, maybe not even with my head or my face, but that voice coming out of EMF beings in the other parts of the country or the world. I've seen some of those visually on the broadcast, where they'll have like a EMF sort of cartoon guy someplace doing something, and he's just being a receiver for me and having my consciousness come out of his mind or body. So, and then also on the perp for people that were still broadcasting me, those aiming to deceive these people who think they're like serving the country, being in EMF gangs or whatnot, this woman was not allowed to hear me use my southern voice talking like I'm from the South. She was not allowed to even hear the accent, which in all of the calculations of divide and conquer and all this shit, like, she's getting fucked. Not that she should be a perp, but I can't even think all the way through of all the deception of that, but it's pretty horrible. No, I'm a synthetic telepath and I fake voices. It's not so much anything that would be like a multiple personality disorder, is that voice could be speaking out of a head in New Jersey. And not only in the EMF sub-reality, I mean in New Jersey. Or at the top of the Empire State Building. Because they're mimicking me. And then some use that in their receivers of me, and then use it explicitly against me in Satanism. Yeah, I did a Bobby Dooley voice for a while, Phil Hendry. And it was fun to use NLP, and it was in mimicry and assault back onto my perps, because I was making fun of them. There was actually one guy in particular, of those that have hung around for 4 years, that was so egotistical, he thought he was the only impersonation that I was basing mine off of, or whatnot. He wanted to be Sweet Tea. He wanted to be the inspiration of an entire generation. No. And then there's like apps you can get on cell phones, which I probably may want to explore just to mess with voice modulation. So I need to think of a better descriptor, being a synthetic telepath who's a TI and not a perp and not an electromagnetic being, but I have sender receivers in between my brain. What it means when I fake a voice, and that same faked voice could be spouting out of the head of 150 electromagnetic beings that I'm more or less not aware of most of the time. I called it interbeing, to shine a turd and maybe glorify something that's a human rights abuse. What Kevin Christian's talking about are people being passed out on machines, having your life experience through your eyeballs, and destroying your life at the same time. That's what's really happening to me. But there may be a better term for when I fake a voice out here in the Northwest, and a big cowboy hat man shows up and tries to frame me for false flag kicking off MK Ultra Super Soldier in Texas. Like, when I was using my voice for Mr. Sweet Tea, I didn't actually open fire on anybody in a shopping center, but I was tricked into the fake news, false flag. How would he even react to something like this while under trauma-based mind control recently? And then also in contrived race-baiting, race wars, shelved plans, stuff that people in the military and black budgets and synthetic telepathy may know. I suspect it wasn't so much that somebody broke into Jack of Twitter's Twitter account and used racial obscenities. He was trauma-based mind controlled, TI'd, and mind controlled even in unspoken channel kind of ways to do it. So Jack was hacked to write that shit. Similar shit has happened to me, and I fake voices, but I'm not dressing up in an EMF manifestation with a big hat. But that may be kind of fun. I gotta get my headgear first, see if I can get away from these perps and these cults or whatnot. But standard divide and tactics stuff is so effective with TI. I saw they may have faked Dr. Horton's form to get her screaming at Romola D, so they would not work together and to keep them isolated. I saw some of the written correspondence, and I didn't read. I couldn't even read all of it. It was pretty horrific, but I knew from reading it, like, an EMF perpetrator faked Dr. Horton's form and went super evil on Romola D, and she was unaware of that part of satanic misdirection with fake people, the holograph stuff, people on headgear, and then those two women like do not work together, do not like each other, and it was an EMF perpetrator in between them faking the form of the other one. So, I really enjoy Kevin Christian of Atlanta's work. He's helped me better understand being at TI. I like people from Georgia. I like people from the South. I'm tortured as well, and my voice is talking out of the heads of an unknown number of receivers anyways. So it may not be so much trauma-based outcome, multiple personality disorder for me when I throw out a southerner's voice. It's that with some off and off switch sort of capabilities, as I'm talking as if I'm from the South, there's like a lot of other receivers, humans and EMF beings, hearing my words and then spitting them out of their mouth too. It's like I'm on fucking football team. Yeah. So there may be a little different qualifier, but I think it's fucking hilarious. And I say some really smart things when I'm just playing dumb. And, I'm not much stupid at all, but the EMF perpetrators, the deviant criminals, human traffickers, synthetic telepathy cults, they have all of their ill, all of their gang, all of the federal government, plus my thoughts as they're happening, as Mr. Kevin Christian describes. So I hope Kevin doesn't take anything personal if he gets like a mean video from me or something like that. And the divide and conquer stuff, I will try and not take personal, but I just saw one of his videos and I want him to know that I do a southerner's voice, but it's not so much multiple personality disorder as it is like there could be like 500 electromagnetic beings in the EMF frequency starting to talk like they're from the South too, right? What I do as well, yeah. And so, yeah. And for me, it's just a funny voice. It's been described as a little more down home. In sort of an effort to try and discourage my broadcast, for sure. And then, of course, absolutely ridicule the former President Bush, who, under his administration, is when I became a TI. I've since, I've got empathy. Like, he got set up. Like, September 11th, that was a blue beam plane wrapped in a missile. And that look on that man's face when he picked up his pet goat story looked like a man that was getting set up.